what the problem was. My other... Oh, it's still acting up. What the heck? Okay, it's a little bit better than what it was. Um, yeah, I think what I'm going to end up having to do is get a freaking booster in this room because a lot of internet issues. Anyways, welcome to the Grease State Truth. I'm your host, Christine, and we're having some daggum internet issues today, which is normal because there's always something wrong. Whether it's the sound in the videos that we can't hear or the daggum internet. But we're doing better right now. And so I don't want to have to restart this whole video. Basically, what we're talking about is Dan's video here. That was a 2019 video that Greg just reposted recently on the Injustice group. And today he's set up his couch to resemble the Crowley home. And he's going to basically give us a demonstration on what discrepancies are in this scene. So we're going to take a look at that and see what discrepancies Dan here sees and what's really the truth. As I was saying, if he really wanted to have some type of physical evidence, he would be using blood or something, or not blood, but ketchup, something that would resemble blood, to write on the wall to resemble this. So let's continue to listen to what Dan has to say and see his shoddy demonstration here.
There's speculation if David's right hand was missing at the scene, if his hand was perhaps cut off and his hand was used to do or perform the writing.
Okay, well, we know that David's hand was placed in an evidentiary bag and sent along with the bodies to the medical examiner because that is in the case file. Yeah, so whether it wasn't missing, it was missing from his body, but not missing from the scene. There is also no proof of cutting of his hand.
And so here's where we got some of the problems with some of this story here from the official narrative. The first question that many people ask is there should be tons of blood dripped onto that cloth sofa from doing the writing and going back and forth from the body.
Okay, so we are talking about a sofa that is one of those types of sofas that it's gray. And when you kind of move the fabric, it, darkens the fabric or lightens the fabric. And we're talking about dried blood here, which sometimes doesn't show up. It's kind of probably seeped into the fabric. I mean, it's pretty logical.
And so I'm going to do the experiment here today just to give you a visual of what that would look like for whoever did this job. So here is a
couch that is nothing like the Crowley's couch and is a leather sofa. Again, if you're wanting to do some type of physical evidence, you need kind of the same couch, I would say, not a leather sofa.
Sofa and a wall.
Wow.
Allegedly, the person would have had to get up.
Now watch your swiping motion there, Dan, because usually when fingerprints are left, that means someone puts their hands on a wall and leaves it there so that way the fingerprint could be seen. However, you're even you're demonstrating how the hand goes in a downward position, which is going to basically wipe away fingerprints. Do you know how that stuff works? I mean, usually when you rub something, you're not pressing a fingerprint into it. You're, putting something on your hand and you're wiping. It's common sense. I mean, and I know these people don't have any, but for him to be doing this demonstration and not even having any type of logical thinking here, I mean, it's pretty sad that he would even subject himself to to standing up on this couch here and pretending, you know, to be David and writing on this wall. I mean, it's pretty clear. He just swiped downward with his daggum hand, and that's going to do what? That's not going to show fingerprints.
Here and write
See?
Allahu Akbar on the wall.
Now, if you had something on your hands and you actually wrote that on the wall, do you think you're going to find a fingerprint? That's what you need to do, Dan. Not wipe your invisible paint across the wall or invisible whatever across the wall, but actual liquid, something.
With their, I'm not saying right or left hand, I'm just saying whichever hand they used to write it, they had to get onto the sofa and write it.
Okay.
Now the body of Comel, because we know it was her blood. That's been proven. Whoever used it was her blood, and she was found right in a corner, snug up against the corner of the sofa, with her hands crossed underneath her.
No, sir. No, sir. You do not know that. There is no pictures or proof that her hands were in this position. They were crossed. Her arms were crossed underneath of her body, but they could have been up more towards her head, or like if you were, laying and you had your chin in your hands. I'd have to do like a demonstration to show you what I'm talking about, but she wasn't laying like this. And even if there's no proof of that, there's no evidence of that. There is hush, Bo, hush. There is a picture, like a drawn sketch. Hush your mouth. Hush. There's a drawn sketch of it, but there is no actual evidence or proof that she was laying that way. So
Comel was laying basically like this.
No.
So that presents the other story, which we'll get into later.
No.
Remember, hands crossed underneath,
No.
both hands missing, laying underneath,
No.
and the dog ate them both off, was the official narrative. The dog ate both.
See, and that's where the lies come in. It is just ridiculous. It's a constant batch of lies in this case when it comes to the injustice group.
Hands off. While at the same time she was, hands were crossed, snug up against the corner. There's no way the dog could even get in there to perform that on one of those hands, much less the other one.
Hold on.
So the body's laying there. Here's what we've got.
She was not snug up against the corner. That's not true at all. Like, not sure where that came from, but that's not true at all. Not true at all. There was nothing here. This couch was not here. Where she is laying at, there was no couch there. So she was not snug in a corner.
If David was reaching down to get blood to then do writing, he would have to come back down and get some more and write
No, he wouldn't, because there was a scarf that was full of it. So why would he need to keep popping down off the couch to get it when literally there's a scarf on the floor that's covered in it, which is what he probably used, right?
Get some more and finish the writing. What the speculation is, which is probably the case, is that something was used to contain the blood, so the person only had to dip in to do the writing. I'm just using a simple plastic bowl. Now, you go up there one time and you're not going back and forth.
Or again, the scarf that was full of blood that was on the floor, right?
The problem is, if something like this was used, we've got two problems. Number one, where is it?
It's on the kitchen table or counter. It's one of those two, but it's in the kitchen. There's a bowl in the kitchen. You might want to take a look at that. But again, I honestly think it was the scarf that was used.
It was not found at the scene. There was no bowl found at the scene. There was no bloody bowl found
That's a lie. Again, another lie here.
at the scene. And if they rinsed it out down some drain, there was no blood in the sink.
No, if you rinse something down the sink, you're likely going to rinse the sink out too, right? I mean, it's kind of plain common sense.
If something like this was used, someone has it today.
Mm, no, it was laying on the floor beside David's leg, all right? The scarf. Or if you want to assume it was a bowl, there was a bowl in the kitchen.
Or it's been disposed of. Nothing.
No, it's probably in your sink. Take your Tupperware back to Mama.
The crime scene photos show anything like
Yes, they do.
this. If David Crowley did it, he would have set it right there below him and ended his life.
Like the scarf, right? Right? I mean, you just said it yourself. He would have sat it down beside of him and took his life. So basically, that's what happened. Like the scarf is right there.
But there's no bowl. Now the other question is, how would Camel's blood get into the bowl? How would the blood be drained from her body into something like this to get it easy to apply on?
Um, Blood usually runs out of the body. I mean, it's liquid. Even if you want to use that narrative, I mean, there's common sense in that too.
On that wall. So I'm leaving it up to the listeners here to do that. The other question is, there's no fingerprints on that wall.
No, because you're wiping. You're using a wiping motion. You're not using a handprint. You're not touching it and leaving your hand there. You're wiping, which isn't going to leave fingerprints.
Speculation in the justice group
Which is all they have is speculation.
is that more than likely the perpetrator used a pair of gloves
No,
to do the writing
no.
on the wall because there's no fingerprints on that wall.
Because there was wiping and not handprints.
The question is, and this is what we want the Justice Page members and those watching videos like this just to keep in mind, to be able to use their critical thinking. Remember, there's no fingerprints. A naked finger would have left fingerprints behind.
No,
There was none.
no.
More than likely, it's safe to.
No, not necessarily. You need to investigate a little bit better because that's incorrect. That is incorrect.
to assume gloves were used, latex gloves, rubber gloves, something. But they were not found at the scene. No gloves found. And
because they
obviously when
weren't
the trash,
used.
photographs of each of the trash were taken by police technicians. So there's gloves out there somewhere, either disposed of or sitting out there to this day that someone's got it, potentially as a trophy. So we've got two issues with that whole scenario. Now, David Crowley, if his hand was cut off, he was missing his right hand. Only photo left was his left hand, which was in a mummified state, almost as if it was tied or under restraints for some time to cause it to mummify fast.
No, tying and restraining does not cause mummification. The air and environmental stuff and decomposition does, not tying.
Faster than the rest of his body. Right hand was missing. Was it cut off? Was it used by the perpetrators to paint on the wall? Well, the answer to that is also no. His hand, whether if it was attached to his body or not, would leave fingerprints. Fingerprints would be left behind on that wall for detectives to go
No, it
into
would not.
test and pull fingerprints off of that wall.
No.
Now, did David Crowley, or the perpetrator, put a glove on David Crowley's right hand that's missing and perform the writing?
Really?
Maybe so.
That's dumb.
I think that if the perpetrators went so far to use his hand to blame it, the blood writing, to show evidence, they would not put a glove on it. Fingerprints would be all over. The detectives would match the.
There's no glove used here. It's just basically a hand that's wiping on a wall. Fingerprints aren't always left behind when it comes to wiping something on a wall.
The fingerprints to David, and obviously you've got your killer because the fingerprints traced it. So the odds of someone putting a glove on a cut-off hand to dip it in blood to do writing is possible but not probable. So the question is, we've got a bowl, some kind of container, a pail, something that the perpetrator or perpetrators use to dip in to write.
Or a scarf that's laying on the floor beside the perpetrator.
Now, what detectives did find, this is how they narrowed it down. In reading the police report, you've got to be able to censor out what they're telling you versus what they are also trying to conceal to you. Evidence proved that David's DNA was on that wall. David Crowley's DNA. The DNA is fingerprint, finger touch, skin cells, not in the blood, but on that wall.
Okay, so the problem here is DNA is blood. DNA is tissue. DNA is saliva, bodily tissues, bodily liquids, things like that. Nowhere in the reports does it say touch DNA was found. And so saying that his DNA was found on the wall, but it wasn't blood, how do you know that? Because what is DNA? I mean, you can ask any forensic medical doctor, anybody, what DNA is, and it's going to clearly tell you what it is.
Now, a typical homeowner is going to use a hammer and hang up a clock, a picture frame, something on the wall. Now, there's nothing on that wall except a clock.
Because they didn't want anything on that wall. I mean, there was no pictures or anything because they didn't want them there. Who are you to say, like, they need to hang up something on that wall? That kind of makes no sense.
David lived in the home for a year.
And
Your fingerprints, not your fingerprints, but touch DNA is going to be on that wall. For instance, David Crowley reading a bedtime story book to Ranny, DNA everywhere, right here. So what they did, and what it's up for the user to decipher, is of course David's DNA is going to be on that wall. Touch DNA, skin cells.
in that
Police report never ever said that his
area, the general area where they tested, though, the only reason it would be in that area is if he were to touch the wall, right? Or his blood was actually on the wall itself.
blood DNA was on that wall. There was blood on the wall, which is Comel's. They assumed it was David who did it. That's the part that's up for conjecture. So there's issues with the whole blood writing on that wall. And I'll go back to that wall once again. As you can see, there's a clock up there. There's nothing else on the wall. But by the nature of the beast, David is a homeowner. His DNA, his touch DNA, or his fingerprints would stand to reason to be on that wall regardless.
Okay.
But we can't assume that was part of the crime.
If
That's
it was
what they
in
did to
that
link
general
it,
area, absolutely, it could be part of that crime. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
On the wall. Now we also have the most blood-filled item in that living room where the crime scene was. Keep in mind that there was not a lot of blood there. The bodies were there. Little bits of blood was there.
That's
Lots
a
of
lie.
hair all over the place.
There was too.
But only the one spot in that living room where there was blood soaked in on the furniture was on a recliner.
Okay.
Here's what that would look like.
And what about the scarf that was on the floor as well? And under the bodies, on the wall, on the floor, pretty much everywhere, right?
For instance, the edge of the recliner was the bottom portion down by the floor.
The recliner.
It was soaked straight through.
The recliner was on the side that David was on, the tree, and then the recliner, and David was in front of the recliner. So his head was literally right there. So yeah, there was a body there. I mean, his body was right there.
With blood. Keep in mind, Comel was over here, Ranny was over there, and David was farther away yet. There was no body here. And this is just, once again, this is just the couch, but where the recliner was, there was no body.
I think he's a little confused because he's saying that that's a couch. Is he implying that this ottoman here is a recliner and that there was blood right here? Because I was assuming the blood was on the actual recliner chair, is what I thought. I mean, I could be wrong, but there's nothing here on this. I thought it was on the recliner chair that was over here where David's head was at. And then that would make a lot of sense that his head was right there.
Be on that wall, regardless. But we can't assume that was part of the crime. That's what they did to link it, though. The blood on the wall. Now, we also have the most blood-filled item.
Let's ask yourself, how in the hell did they link it? Like, kind of makes no sense.
We're not fighting that battle anymore. We already know that David Crowley did not do this because he couldn't have done this.
Why couldn't he have?
Now, folks new to the case usually come from after watching that documentary by Eric Nelson. And they come over and join the page and say, you know what?
And then they give some false information without any logical thinking or anything like that.
David had mental illness.
Yep.
David had depression.
Yep.
David had PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
There was paranormal activity in the home.
Maybe.
There was drugs involved.
Yep.
There was alcohol involved.
Yep.
There was hallucinogens
Yes.
involved. For those people that say any of those, that long list of excuses or
Uh-huh.
reasons,
Uh-huh.
those may all be true. Every one of those could be true from a factual
They
standpoint.
are.
That did not cause the death of these three individuals.
Why didn't it? Because we know that people that take hallucinogens and all those other things have committed these crimes in the past. So how are you going to assume that those things didn't lead up to the reasoning for this happening? You don't know that. I mean, people with PTSD have done this stuff before. People with depression have done this stuff before, and people with drugs have done this stuff before. So for you to actually assume that it wasn't done and that, like, no, sorry, you're giving out false information as usual.
And remember now, the death of these three, David, Comel, and Rania. Here's a Christmas photo from 2 years before the deaths.
Okay.
Now they want you to believe that these things happened, and they'll lead you down the rabbit hole of searching on a never-ending goose.
So he's going to show a happy little Christmas picture of them three and saying, "Oh Lord, how in the world would someone, you know, that looks like this do that? Why would they do something like that? Well, let's take a look at all of the other cases of all the happy things." Pictures, Christmas pictures of families and stuff like that. Casey Anthony, for example, there's tons of pictures of her and Kaylee Anthony all happy go lucky, but look what happened. So, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Sorry, doesn't matter what a picture looks like, it's just a picture.
Chase as if David drank. Did he use drugs? Was there hallucinogens? That's got nothing to do with anything in this case.
Sure,
the bullet
it
that
does.
went through David's head, allegedly found in the attic, didn't have blood or brain matter on it. Just had his touch DNA,
No,
like he handled it.
no.
He would have handled
Oh,
it.
no. DNA was found on it. And again, ask yourself what DNA is. Like, we know. Hold on. Let me switch this over to the screen share real quick. Alright, hold on just a second. Pull this up. So I can get the right thing here. But there's nothing in that report that says that it was touch DNA. It states DNA, and DNA is blood. It is brain matter. It is liquids from your body. Anything that's on your body has your DNA on it. But the report said nothing about it being touch DNA. Nothing. So that is a big flat lie. Another lie that you're telling people, because if you read the report, it states DNA. It doesn't state touch DNA, trace DNA. It says DNA. What is DNA? I mean, your name is Dan, right? So DAN, switch the N and the A around. I mean, can you have a little common sense here? I mean, DNA is blood. DNA is tissue. It's matter. It's liquid. It's whatever is on your body is your DNA. the amount of lies that they will tell to get people to believe this narrative is ridiculous. And it's clear in this video. Everything that he is stating is a lie.
each bullet when loading the magazine. So all of his bullets would have his touch
Yeah,
DNA on it.
but they didn't.
So
So what does that mean? That there's not always going to be DNA on every single bullet. I mean, it's common sense there because we know that all those bullets didn't have his DNA on it. They didn't have any. There was one that didn't have anybody's on it. So, and you're saying that if someone touched those, then their DNA would be on it, right? So, where's these other people that committed this? Where's their DNA in that house? There is none. There's no trace of anyone else's DNA in that house. So how are you going to assume that someone else is in this house and committed this crime when there's literally no one else's DNA in this house? None. Nowhere.
So police cannot conclude, without having the bullet that killed the man, that he did it. And also keep in mind, a side note, no fingerprints found on the gun. So someone wiped down the gun.
No, they didn't.
Someone planted or staged.
They didn't wipe it down because there's hair and everything else all over it. So if they would have wiped it down, then there wouldn't be anything on it at all. But we know that's not true because there is stuff on it.
A bullet hole in the thing that has nothing to do with anything. And so these are all forms of distraction to keep people focused on other things instead of focusing on the
What you're doing is a distraction and trying to push a narrative that is incorrect.
real deal. So we got the hair issue. We've got the body issue of Kamel in the corner, hands missing underneath her,
No.
blamed on the dog eating them. Bullet in the attic wasn't found until the next month. February of 2015, the bullet in the attic was found.
Okay.
It's known as the infamous item number 57.
Okay.
It was fired. It was found in the attic.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where it was fired, but it came from that gun,
Yeah.
and it had touch DNA on it only.
No.
So there's a whole.
Show me in that report where it says touch DNA. Show me in the report because the report that I seen said item 57 had his DNA on it. Didn't say touch, didn't say trace, it said DNA. And we know that DNA is what? Critical thinking here.
Whole thing that Chris Klein tells police about a month afterwards. Police come, look at the ceiling when they come into the entranceway. Remember now, mind you, this is in the living room where the entire crime scene took place. They said police must have missed it. They must have missed the crime, the bullet hole in the ceiling, the most important bullet.
Yeah, because there's 3 decomposing bodies on the floor and a ton of evidence on the floor. So you're kind of consumed with what's in front of you and not what's above you.
In the crime, when placing the blame on David Crowley, is that bullet number 57. Police didn't even have it for a month later. Then they find it in the attic. This is after a 911 call came out on January 19th saying there's suspicious activity in the home. Chris Klein was in the house with a handful of other folks. Remember, the 19th. We know from the police reports that the professional biohazard cleaners were in the house on January 20th. So the question is, they found a bullet fragment that came out of the rug in the living room on the 20th of January, 3 days later. The 911 call for suspicious activity came on the 19th. These folks were in the house. Now the question is, was that bullet hole there?
Listen to what you just said. You said that Chris Klein was in the house on the 19th. And the biohazard people came on the 20th of January. And that he was there the day before the cleanup crew. Wrong. The bullet that was found in the ceiling was found a month later in February when Chris Klein was there, not in January before the biohazard crew was there. See, you can't even get your own story straight, and that's the biggest problem of all.
On the 17th, when investigators, crime scene technicians, the medical examiner was on site, the officers, the detectives.
So, what you're saying is they were found on the 17th. The crime scene techs and all that were there on the 17th. That Chris Klein was there on the 19th. And then the biohazard people were there on the 3rd, because that's what you just said.
We're in the house on January 20th. So the question is, they found a bullet, the crime, the bullet hole in the ceiling. The most important bullet in the crime, when placing the blame on David Crowley, is that bullet number 57. Police didn't even have it for a month later. Then they
Okay, so here he says they didn't have it until a month later. Now listen.
Find it in the attic. This is after a 911 call came out on January 19th.
Wrong.
Saying there's suspicious activity in the home. Chris Klein was in the house with a handful of other folks.
Listen again to what he just said. He says that they were found on the 17th, that Chris Klein and a handful of other folks were in the house on the 19th, the day before the crime scene cleanup crew. And that is what he just said. Posting this in Justice Group as factual evidence and proof that you guys are right over there.
Remember, the 19th.
Listen.
We know from the police reports that the professional biohazard cleaners were in the house on January 20th. So the question is, they found a bullet fragment that came out of the rug in the living room on the 20th of January, 3 days later. The 911 call for suspicious activity came on the 19th. These folks were in the house. Now the question is, was that bullet hole there on the 17th when investigators...
Listen to what he's saying. He can't even get his story straight. He says, again, that they were found on the 17th, that Chris Klein went in and found the bullet hole on January 19th, and that the cleanup crew came January the 20th. I think you mean February. Get your story straight. You're so indulged in these lies that you can't even get your dates straight.
Crime scene technicians, the medical examiner was on site, the officers, the detectives, there must have been 20 people in that house. And the Gray State guys are claiming, Gray State guys, the alleged friends of David Crowley, are claiming that police and everyone in that house must have simply missed that bullet hole in the ceiling. Now, with the bullet hole, as with anything else, investigators would have taken a photograph here, 3 or 4 different variations of a hole in the ceiling, zoomed in, backwards, what level of detail. There would have been multiple photos of a bullet hole. There was no photos of the bullet hole on January 17th when police...
Actually, there is. You could see the bullet hole from one of the pictures in when they were found. If you look up, you can see the anomaly in the ceiling. So here goes another lie that he's going to tell.
Police got it. Now, police, I think, in the process right now with Officer Detective James Gummert, the lead detective, is answering a question from Greg Fernandez, because Gummert does think that in one of the photos, or some of the photos, that detectives did show that they did take photographs of that bullet hole, meaning that they were aware of it. Remember now, the Upper Valley Police Department, they're in a corner, they're backed into a corner here. If they weren't aware of it and it was there, they're going to look really bad by missing something so obvious. If it was planted later and it legitimately wasn't there on January 17th when detectives got there, then they just find themselves getting duped again by the perpetrators, whoever made the hole there a couple days later, which is the Gray State team and David Crowley's brother and potentially his father.
That's a lie. And this is called doxing people and blaming people, innocent people. Um, we know that the bullet that was found in the ceiling was fired from David's gun. We know that. That gun was placed into evidence on the 17th. So even if someone came in there the day after, that gun wouldn't have been there to be able to use to put that hole there or to put that bullet there with David's DNA, because David's in the medical or the mortuary and the freaking gun is locked away into the evidence place. So how do you do that? I'm serious. I would love to have a conversation with this guy just to pull his ridiculous story apart.
They were in the house on the 19th. This is their own statements. This is not me making it up. This is per the police reports
They were there in February.
and per the testimony given to detectives. They were in that house on January 19th. Now, what were they doing? I don't know. Officially, they were helping organize some things for the family and help getting things ready for the funeral and memorial.
Okay, and people do that. People do that. They go and they get pictures or whatever for a funeral, or people's items or somebody's clothing or whatever, their favorite animal, stuffed animal. Like, people do that. You know that, right? Like, it's normal thing for people to do.
Service. But you have to ask yourself the question. You have to ask yourself the question, what was so urgent to get into that house to start preparing for the memorial service and start getting things arranged on the 19th of January after a triple homicide took place at that very location 2 days earlier?
Well, because they usually
Keep
bury
in
people
mind the
right
cleaners
after
weren't
they're
there.
found
They may
or
have been
after
there
they
already,
die. I mean,
but they weren't
that's
done because they still came back and were cleaning on the 20th of January. So I think the cleaners wrapped up on either the 20th, 21st, 22nd, sometime in that time frame. The cleaners professionally cleaned the house and then opened it up to the public or to the family. But while cleaners are in the house, no one's supposed to be in that house doing anything. And that's a key point to remember. If the
usually it's the family that hires the cleaners to come and clean the houses, not the detectives or the police or anything like that. It's usually the family. And even when after the bodies and the evidence from the house is removed, the family or whoever takes over their estate is allowed to go into that house, whether whatever's there or not. They're allowed to be in that house. So, not sure where you got your information from, but it's usually the family that pays for the cleaning people. And they have full access as soon as the crime scene is cleared, the bodies are taken out, and the evidence is taken out of the house. So, sorry.
the cleaners are in that house after the police open it up to the cleaners to clean, there still should be no one coming through that house, much less 5 or 6 guys helping
No,
organize things for the family's memorial.
that's a lie. That's a lie. The family is the people that usually hire crime scene cleaners. Like, the detectives and the police have nothing to do with that. It's usually the family that takes care of all of that. I mean, you can get a hold of pretty much any crime scene cleanup crew and ask them who pays for that, who does that. It's the family, and they have full access to that house as soon as the bodies and the evidence are taken out.
Memorial service. So now you have to ask yourself the next question, why was there such an urgent need to get into that house? Well, mistakes were made in the staging of this crime. The perpetrators realized that it wasn't a nice, tidy crime scene. There was no bullet that killed David Crowley. There was no bullet.
Oh, here we go.
He died of a suicide. They knew that when the autopsy took place and they didn't find the bullet in the head, they didn't find it laying at the scene, and they didn't find it in a wall or a ceiling. It had to have been in that house. There was no bullet.
Uh,
The bullet wasn't there. Police didn't find the bullet. So there comes a need now, a requirement for the perpetrators to get back into the house to plant that evidence so everything ties out.
but tell me, Dan, how did they do that if the gun was locked away into evidence and not in the house? How was DNA put on the bullet in the ceiling if they never touched the bullet? And it was in the spot where it fell. You make no sense. Like you're a grown ass dude, and look at you. You have no common sense at all. Like, how does that work? A gun that is proven to have fired the bullet that's in the ceiling, and it's in locked away in evidence, but you're claiming that people went in there and okay, okay.
Now the detectives are already duped once. They wrapped up this whole crime scene on the 17th, kind of put the finishing touches on it the 18th, and I think by that 18th or 19th day, the press releases were already going out as they were treating it as a double homicide, followed by a suicide by David Crowley, a crazed lunatic from the alt-right,
Yeah,
which is not true.
yes. It
I created the
is.
Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook page on January 19th, that morning, when things didn't make sense to me, and I lived 30 minutes away. So I had set up the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group before the bullet was even there, before the cleaners were done, and before that 911 phone call came in from a neighbor saying there's suspicious activity
Well,
going on
before
in the house
you
that
had
doesn't relate
any
to the
common
cleaners.
sense,
There was a
which you still
GMC
don't
pickup truck
have.
there, which turned out to be Chris Klein's. Klein says he got in the house because he got permission from Dan Crowley Sr., that's David Crowley's father, who lives 45 minutes away.
Okay.
Dan Crowley Sr. tells police that he was never in the house with Chris Klein. But Dan Crowley Jr. was in the house, along with, I think it was Adam Shambor, Danny August Mason, and Mason Hendricks. There was a handful of guys in that house on the 19th. So the question now comes down to, why aren't police focusing on those guys in the house before the cleaning was done?
Because
But
they
they're
don't
too
need
busy
to. They
trying to
are,
find.
because they're family and they have a right to go into the house because that's their family's house and there's no need for the police to be there any longer. Again, you need to get a hold of a cleaning crew that does that kind of work and ask them who pays for that and how that situation pans out, how it works out, because it's not what you're saying at all.
Photos of a bullet to avoid themselves from looking bad from missing it. When I don't think that bullet hole was there till the 19th.
Wrong.
They came in there on the 19th.
Well, Dan, obviously you need to take another hard look at the evidence pictures because it's there. Now, go back and kick your own self in the ass and come on a live show with me and talk to me because I would love to hear your side of the story now that you've opened your mouth to blame people and say that, the family and friends have put this hole there, that somebody broke into the police evidence and took this gun and shot a bullet out of the gun. I mean, that's ridiculous. So, calling you out, buddy. Anyways, I'm going to hop off here because I got to make some dinner for my kids. We will pick this back up tomorrow. I'm going to try to keep these lives short and sweet so that way people can watch them and actually understand them. But go back and listen to the things this guy has said and have a little bit of common sense when you're doing it, because he can't get his story straight. He can't get his date straight. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And clearly, we know that a gun in evidence at a police station can't be, taken back out unless it's somebody that is a professional, that dealt with this crime, FBI, police officer, whatever. Um, but we also know that there's pictures that were taken the day of the 17th when the bodies were still there with, and it shows the hole in the ceiling. Now, whether they've seen it or not, it's if you're have everything going on in front of you on the floor that was going on in front of these officers and the things that they had to see that day, I wouldn't be looking above my head either. It's kind of pointless to look up when you have all that evidence lying in front of you and you don't want to contaminate the scene any longer or any more than it's already been contaminated. So you can't get a gun out of evidence to shoot it the next day or the day after or any other time. You can't get DNA from a body after it's already been removed and taken to the medical examiner's office. And the police and the FBI or whatever don't pay for cleanup crews. The family does. Once the bodies and the evidence are removed from the home and the police have no other reason to be there, the family is more than welcome to go into that house. Now, most people don't because they don't want to see what happened. They don't want to see any of that. But if they want to, they can, and you can literally watch that. There's an actual uh, cleanup crew that does this type of stuff, and they're called. Hold on, let me find it. I think it's like Decon, or I can't remember what the name of them is, but you can. They may have changed the name of their channel. This is Crime Scene Cleaning now, but I know that before, yeah, they used to be called Decon or something like that. I think the name of their channel now is called Crime Scene Cleaning. And so basically, you can, Spalding Decon, sorry, that is the name of their company. You can call them and even ask them who pays for that. Um, do the police release the house to the family after? And they will tell you that, you know, the family pays for this. The police don't pay for this. The state doesn't pay for this. It's the actual family that goes in and pays for all this cleanup stuff. And you can call them or you can email them and get that information. But anyways, we're gonna hop off here. As always, make sure you follow us on the Crowley Case Fact versus Fiction on Facebook and YouTube, or you can go check out Deep State Granny on YouTube, or you can hang out here. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment down below because we like comments.